It was a rough beginning and a bitter end to the month of August, but overall, it was a positive month for the Atlanta Braves. We'll take a look back at what they did right, but they need to do more going forward in the month of September if they're going to get to the postseason. We'll look ahead to what they need to do in the coming month in order for the Atlanta Braves to get a chance in the postseason. All that on today's episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I'm your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on social media at Shortstop Ball. Check out the podcast at LockedOn_Braves. Subscribe on YouTube if you're new. Over 11,000 subscribers now on YouTube. Thank you for being part of that group. Make sure you leave me a comment, hit that thumbs up button, all the good stuff, so others can join us here at Locked On Braves. If you're listening on the audio version, make sure you leave me a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're an everydayer, again, let me know if you make this your first listen of each and every day. I really do appreciate you. Let me know that as well. Today's episode, we're going to take a look back at the month of August, a month that had a rough losing streak in it and had a bitter end in Philadelphia. But overall, it was a positive month. You saw some good signs from the Braves offense. For the most majority, there was a little hiccup from the starting pitching, but again, they've been great all year long and were for the majority of the month of August. But we're also going to look ahead to September, where the schedule is pretty light and the Braves have the opportunity here to win a lot of games, have another good month, and play some good baseball going into, hopefully, the postseason. We'll talk about what they need to do to get that done. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. I want to take a look back real quick, and I'm going to throw some numbers at you looking at the month of August for the Atlanta Braves. They went 16-13 in the month of August. That included a 6-game losing streak and 6 one-run losses in the month of August. They played 10 one-run games, so a lot of close games, most of that due to the fact that the offense still had its struggles, but the pitching staff was still good enough to keep them in a lot of games. They were 4-6 in those one-run games, and that really hurt it, especially 4 of those losses coming to the Marlins, Rockies, and Angels. That Rockies series in particular, and the Braves are about to play the Rockies again, that's the one that I look back on the month of August that you let a couple get away from you. And you win those 2 games. You win that one in Anaheim. You win one of these games against the Phillies at the end of the month. You feel much better about your chances going into September. But they didn't. And here we are as the Braves are hanging on to a postseason spot with the Mets winning on Monday and the Braves idle. The Braves, after the end of Tuesday night, could be out of a playoff spot, because the Mets are just a half game back now. But when I look back to the month of August and just some games that you let get away, obviously the one in Colorado, that just cannot happen. A game in Anaheim you felt like you should have won. Like I said, one of those Phillies games at least, you got to come away with a win. So just a couple of games there in that Marlins series too, just winning those first 2 and then falling flat in the second 2, leading to a 6-game losing streak. So while it was a good month, 16-13, you still could see a pretty easy path to them doing better. I guess on the flip side, you could say there's a path to them doing worse, because there were a lot of close games and they figured out a way to win some of those close games later in the month. But overall, an impressive month for the Atlanta Braves, a winning month. Haven't seen a lot of those this year. You had a 12-13 July and a 13-14 May with a 14-13 June. This was the most wins we've seen in a month since April, when the Braves went 17-8, and they've been riding that hot streak pretty much ever since. I want to look at some stats, though, in the month of August, where I think we did start to see some improvement from the offense. The Braves were second in Major League Baseball in home runs in August with 46. We know coming in, that's what this lineup is built upon. Now, you've lost a lot of key members that made that lineup so powerful, but still you're able to see them get back to hitting home runs, and that's what this team does to score. They were just 10th in runs scored, though, despite having all those home runs, but still they averaged 4.6 runs per game. And if you can do that with this pitching staff, I feel really good about the Braves' chances in September. However, they were still just 15th in batting average, but they were 10th in on-base percentage because they had the 5th most walks. That's something you saw them do a lot better in the month of August, is take their walks. Guys like Whit Merrifield, even Jorge Soler, I know he hasn't been hitting, but he was taking his walks. They still struck out far too much. They had the 2nd most strikeouts in August, behind only Colorado, who the Braves are about to see. So if you're playing on PrizePicks this week, you might want to pick more on some of the Braves strikeout totals. I'll go ahead and throw that one out there. They were 8th in slugging percentage and 9th in OPS. So by most accounts, this was a top 10 offense in August. And that's all we've really been asking for. We said from the beginning, if the Braves could just be a top 15 offense in baseball, that this team would be in a much better place with the way the pitching staff has been. But, after April until August, this was basically a bottom 5, bottom 10 offense in baseball. And finally, we see them start to act like a top 10 offense, and you see them have a good month. You see them have a winning month. So if they can keep that up again in September, again, I really like the Braves' chances. One other note, just because, just add on to some of the pain for this year, they grounded into 32 double plays in the month of August, which was the most by 4, and it was a much wider gap. They stopped hitting into some of those double plays in that Phillies series, and the Astros hit into a lot themselves. But that was something that really hurt the Braves a lot in the month of August. Just too many double plays, too many stagnant base runners, and that still happened. Just fortunately, you didn't have as many double plays when that was the case. Now, looking individually at the month of August, Matt Olson was the hitter of the month. That may come as a surprise to many of you, but he slashed 264, 339 with a 573 slug for a 912 OPS, had 10 doubles and 8 home runs, and he drove in 27. Really needed to see that from Matt Olson, especially the extra base hit and RBI totals as well, something that's been missing, sorely missing for Matt Olson a lot of this season. It was good to see him turn it around there in the month of August. One thing you also saw in the month of August, he cut his strikeout rate down to 21% for the month of August. That's been up near 30 for most of the year. He cut it down to 21%, and that's what we saw him do after April last year when he took off for the rest of the season. So again, if that continues, and he had a 9.7% walk rate in August, if that continues, and 21's maybe too much to ask for, but even if Matt Olson's at a 23, 24% strikeout rate, where he was most of last year, again, after April, and he's walking 9 to 10% of the time, you're going to see the good version of Matt Olson in September, and the Braves have to have it. Now, Marcell Ozuna, he had a 933 OPS with 6 home runs in the month of August, just continuing to do what he's done. However, he's had a strikeout rate of 29% the last 2 months now. And look, Marcell Ozuna comes through, he gets his hits, he gets on base, he's great. He's been great. But almost a 30% strikeout rate over the past 2 months now, that is tough. And I think you have seen more at bats from Ozuna lately, where he has been striking out more and looking a little bit lost at the plate. Yeah, and he's still come through. I'm not concerned about Ozuna in the slightest, but I thought that was worth mentioning, the fact that he's had a pretty high strikeout rate for 2 months now. Laureano had a 906 OPS in August, just 4 walks to 4 walks to 24 strikeouts. Love to see him get on base a little bit more. Soler had an 802 OPS. That was aided by 15 walks as he hit just 203 in the month of August. Love the walks, and that's great, and that's part of the reason why the Braves got him. They also got him to hit tanks and come up with big hits, and we just didn't see enough of that from Soler in the month of August. He did have the hamstring injury, kind of set him back, and maybe kind of slow coming back from that. It also has hurt the Braves a lot defensively. So at this point, even with the high on-base total, I don't know that you can say Soler has helped this team like you hoped he would. I think he's been more of a negative defensively than he has been a positive offensively so far. The Braves need that to change. Arcia had a 755 OPS in August. Whit Merrifield was the only other regular with an OPS over 700, and that was at 701 as he really struggled the last week of August. Interestingly enough, it's a Locked On Braves podcast, so I got to talk about the catcher situation. You look at the numbers for the month of August, Sean Murphy actually had 9 more at-bats and played more than Travis d'Arnaud. It doesn't feel like that at times, but he did. Travis d'Arnaud had just a 614 OPS and hit just 184 in the month of August. And look, there's this there's this perception that he has been much better at the plate than Sean Murphy. And I think that's just because he at least puts the ball in play, which you need. And I would agree. I think on the most part, he's been more consistent at the plate than Sean Murphy. But the numbers in August wouldn't tell you that he has been that much better, that he deserves to be the primary catcher. You look at Sean Murphy, he hit 224 in the month of August. Again, not like he was amazing. A 697 OPS, which again was carried by 8 walks. He at least took his walks, had a couple home runs in there. Again, not trying to spark this debate. It baffles me the way that Sean Murphy has been treated with the Atlanta Braves. But we'll see what happens down the stretch. Who's the go-to guy? And I do agree. I think you just play the hot hand and the guy that you think gives you the better chance at the plate, even though I do think Sean Murphy's defense behind the plate is more valuable, especially if both guys aren't hitting. I'd rather have Murphy behind the plate. But we'll see how that plays out the rest of the way. Next, I want to get into the pitching stats for the month of August, because I think you're going to be a little surprised with where the Braves pitchers ranked in the month of August. It's going to be much lower than maybe you would expect. We'll talk about that and also look towards September here next. You shouldn't have to worry when you buy tickets to your next big event, and you don't when you use Gametime, which is what I use. It's what I'm using right now. I'm checking tickets constantly for the upcoming game on Sunday, which I plan to be there for the Braves and the Blue Jays. And I'm just waiting because they got flash deals coming all the time. Tickets go down as you get closer to game time. So I'm constantly checking the Gametime app. It's so easy to use. You can get an all-in price filtered right there on your screen. You get a view from your seat right there in the app. And the Gametime guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Hopefully you took advantage of Gametime's Labor Day deal where you got 50% off tickets to the Dodgers and Diamondbacks game. If you use that, let me know in the comment section below. Would love to hear from you. Hopefully you enjoyed the game. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you for making Locked On Braves your first listen of today. Now make your second listen to Locked On MLB podcast, where Sully is getting you ready for the postseason, covering all the teams of Major League Baseball. You can check that out on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. What's coming up later this week on the podcast, we are going to talk about which wild card spot is the best spot for the Atlanta Braves. The division is done. We talked about that yesterday. Which wild card spot is the one that you want to be in? Is it 1? Is it 2? Is it 3? We're going to talk about that on a podcast episode later this week. We will also have our mailbag episode later this week as well. So a lot coming your way this week as we gear up for hopefully the postseason and a big stretch of September for the Atlanta Braves. Before we get into all of that, though, I did want to talk about the pitching stats for the month of August before we look ahead to September. Surprisingly, I bet you would not have guessed this. The Rays were ranked in the bottom half in ERA in the month of August. They were 17th in ERA in August at 4.24, and they were 22nd in WHIP. I would not have guessed that in 100 years. I would have said they were a top 10 pitching staff, top 10 ERA, top 10 WHIP. But they had a 1.35 ERA, a 261 batting average against. They gave up the second most hits of any team in August. Only the Rockies gave up more. Again, I had to double check, triple check these stats. That was just astounding to me. It did not feel like that watching the game. It did not feel like that. They give up 4.5 runs per game. Now, that said, this is sometimes the issue with looking at stats in a small sample size. And a month in baseball terms is still somewhat of a small sample size. A lot of that came in a 6-7 game stretch that started with that last game against the Marlins and carried on through the Brewers and Rocky series in Colorado. In that stretch of 7 games, the Braves gave up 7, 10, 8, 16, 6, 8, and 9 runs. So a lot of that damage was done during that 7-game stretch, which included, a 6-game losing streak in there. A lot of that damage against the pitching staff came in 1 week. Outside of that, the pitching staff was amazing and was what it's been all year long. They still led all of baseball with a 10.88 K per 9 in the month, but they were middle of the pack in walk per 9, something that, they haven't been great with all year long. Individually, Max Fried had a 4.96 ERA as he struggled to come back after missing some time after the All-Star break. Morton was up and down. He had a 4.60 ERA in August. Chris Sale, Ronaldo Lopez, Spencer Schwellenbach, they were all brilliant for the month. ERAs can be misleading for relievers, but Johnson, Jimenez, Holmes, Bummer, they all had ERAs over 4 in the month of August. And Raisel Iglesias, I didn't look at what else everybody else did around Major League Baseball for the month of August, but Iglesias, I think, has to be in there for pitcher of the month. 13 1/3 innings. He gave up 2 hits, no walks, no earned runs, 14 strikeouts. That's a whip of 0.15. I mean, he was nearly untouchable in the month of August. And I want to say it was 3 times where he pitched the 9th inning and pitched the 10th inning. And there's a lot of extra inning games there in the month of August. I know he's done it 3 times this year. I want to say he did it all 3 times in August. Either way, Raisel Iglesias was amazing and has been amazing. And the Braves need him to continue to be amazing. But that month of August is one of the better months I've seen for a reliever. Now, Luke Jackson and Jesse Chavez on the bad side, they showed they don't belong in this bullpen anymore and should not be getting high leverage situations. They combined to give up 28 hits, 10 walks, and 17 earned runs in 20 1/3 innings. These guys just can't be trusted. At this point of the season, you do not throw those guys out there unless you were up by 10 runs or unless you were down by 8 runs. You cannot trust those guys right now in the bullpen. So the pitching staff, again, while I feel like just watching the team every day, I felt like the pitching staff was excellent once again, but there was that 1 week stretch where they were really, really bad. And again, that was why they lost 6 games in a row during that part, because without this pitching staff, this team really has no chance. But that was certainly a rough stretch for the Braves pitchers in there. All right, next, we're going to look at what's ahead, the slate for the month of September. What do the Braves need to do in September to reach the postseason? The division is gone. We have conceded that to the Phillies after what happened this past weekend, but there is still a chance for this team to get hot, and they were playing good baseball going into Philadelphia. Can they get back to that? What do they need to do? There's a 9-game stretch coming up that the Braves have to take advantage of. If they are going to make the postseason and make a run in the postseason, they have to take advantage of this 9-game stretch coming up. We'll talk about that here next. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. The NFL season right around the corner. I believe it's starting this Thursday or this weekend. So you can get a little extra with your NFL Sunday Ticket for a 3-week free trial there. And then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. Also, make sure you visit FanDuel.com/playsafe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way you play. Again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Download America's #1 sportsbook, and any $5 bet, you can get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, let's shift gears and let's talk about what's ahead. And it was nice that the Braves had a pretty solid month of August, put themselves in a good spot going into September. But the Mets are playing good baseball. They don't lose. What's the Frank the Tank meme? The Mets don't lose. That's what it feels like right now. The Cubs finally lost on Monday, but they've been playing good baseball. Padres and Diamondbacks have actually kind of fallen back a little bit. So you got a 4 or 5 team race going into the month of September. The Braves are going to have to play good baseball, some of the best baseball they've played all year if you want to get into the postseason. Look, as frustrating and sad, I think is an appropriate word to describe the season for the Atlanta Braves just because of all the injuries. Despite all that, if this team gets in with that pitching staff, and if that pitching staff can be healthy once they get in, I still believe in this team. Maybe you don't, and I certainly understand. But I just feel like if this team can just get in and you shorten up, these series and these off days, and you can throw out your best 3 to 4 relievers every night, and you only have to count on, Sale, Fried, Lopez, Schwellenbach in the rotation, I like this team's chance. I really, really do. So if they can just get in, I feel like they have at least a puncher's chance with the pitching staff if they can get in. But that is a big if. They certainly have to do some work, and they're going to have to earn this to get into the postseason. Now, they do have, I think, a bit of a favorable schedule when you look at the month of September, especially this 9-game stretch that we're going to talk about. But your hardest games, you have 4 at home against the Dodgers. And whether that's home or away, that's going to be a tough series, but at least you get it at home. And then you end the season, again, at home against the Mets and the Royals, who are good teams that are going to be fighting for a postseason spot. So your only games against winning teams, you get all of those games at home. That's a huge benefit for the Braves. And you get a lot of your games at home this month. You have a quick little 2-game road trip to go up to DC, and then you have a 6-game road trip where you play in Cincinnati and at Miami. So this is a very favorable schedule for the Atlanta Braves the rest of the way. I think their hardest stretch is going to be that 6-game stretch to end the season, but if they take care of business in the first 3 weeks of this month, then you got a little room to play with in that final week, which again is all at home. All of your hard games are at home in the month of September. But I think a lot of it will come down to what happens in these next 9 games. This Atlanta Braves team has played well against good teams this year, winning record against teams above 500. What has really bitten them this year? A series loss to the White Sox, getting swept by the Nationals. They have not been able to take care of the teams that they need to take care of. And that's what this 9-game stretch will be. This next 9-game stretch will be, can you take care of the teams that you should beat? You got a 7-game homestand where you're going to play 3 against the Rockies, 3 against the Blue Jays, and a makeup game against the Reds, who you lost the first 2 games of that series at home. But this is a 7-game stretch at home against losing teams who are out of it. And then you go to DC for 2 games against the Nationals, who have handled you all year long, although you did win the last series against them. But this is a 9-game stretch where the Braves have to go 7-2. In my mind, the Braves have to go 7-2 in this upcoming 9-game stretch. Anything less than that, I think, is somewhat of a letdown, if not a failure. You have to finally take care of the teams that you are supposed to beat. It's why they're in the position that they are in now. Look, you can talk about all the injuries, and that is certainly a valid excuse for the way the season has gone. But I think if you want to look even further than that, it's the fact that you have not beat these teams that even with all the injuries, you should be handling pretty easily. And that's been one of the bigger frustrations of this season. Injuries are going to happen. The Braves have had more than anybody and more significant injuries than anybody. But this team has still been talented enough to beat the White Sox of the world, to beat the Rockies of the world, to beat the Nationals of the world. And they haven't done it. But now is the time. You have to get it done. And this next 9-game stretch, you have to go 7-2. If they do that, I think they're going to put themselves in a really good position for the rest of the month, because then you get 4 at home against the Dodgers. I think honestly, best case scenario, you split that series. I know the Dodgers pitching isn't great, but that offense is still really, really good. And I think they can still score just enough runs to beat the Braves, even with the Braves' good pitching staff. And I just don't trust the Braves offense to outscore the Dodgers. So I think best case scenario in that 4-game set with the Dodgers at home is that you split that series. And then you go on a 6-game road trip where you're facing the Reds and the Marlins. That's got to be an easy 4 wins, if not 5. It just has to be. This is what you have to do if you're going to get into the postseason. You have the schedule in front of you to get it done. You have to get it done. There is no more waiting till we figure it out next month. There is none of that. Now is the time for this Atlanta Braves team. And then you finish with a 6-game homestand against the Mets and against the Royals. Again, 2 good teams. I think at that point, if you take care of business up to that point in September, I think you can go 3-3 in that homestand. Obviously, I'd like to go 4-2 and finish that off. but I think you can go 3-3 in that homestand if you take care of business in the first half of this month. If they don't, then they're really going to have to do some work in that final homestand. Again, get some really good team, a Mets team that you might be battling for a postseason spot, and a Royals team who they look pretty secure for a wild card spot at the moment, but who knows what that's going to look like at the end of the month. I think best case scenario, and I see Doc's card saying 20-6, that would be a wild scenario that I will certainly take, but I think maybe a realistic scenario is 16-9. If you can go 16-9, and I don't think that's too much to ask. I really, really don't. But if you can go 16-9 in the month of September, that's 90 wins. And to think that this team could get to 90 wins with all the injuries they've had, with the bad offense that they've had for most of the season, to think that they could realistically get to 90 wins this month with just what I think is it certainly would be a really good month, but I think a month with this schedule that is very doable. I think that would be a great accomplishment. Whether they make the postseason or not, if this team finds a way to get to 90 wins, I think that is a huge accomplishment for Brian Snitker and this team with everything they've gone through. You cannot be worse than 13-12 this month. If you have a 13-12 month, I think you're certainly out of the postseason. That's 87-75. And just with the way the Diamondbacks, the Padres, the Mets, even the Cubs are playing right now, you would have told me coming into the year, I think 87 wins gets you into the postseason easy in a wild card spot. I don't know that you can say that right now. So you can't go any worse than 13-12. And again, 87-75, that might not be enough. But I think 16-9 is very doable. I think that's, again, I don't think that's a lot to ask. And I think that's what you have to expect as a fan. I know Braves players, as they should, they're going to take it a game at a time and try to win each and every one. But I think as a fan, unless there's another injury knocking on the wooden desk behind me, I think that's what you should expect from this team with this schedule that they have. Again, all of your tough games, you have 3 series left against teams above 500. They all come at home. You got to take advantage of this schedule in September. And I think 16-9 is realistic, and I think it's what you should expect. And I think if they do that, they're going to get into the postseason. So that's what I think the Braves have to do in September. Let me know what you think. Is that enough? Is that realistic for this team? Again, we haven't seen them play that good of baseball for most of this year, so maybe I'm still thinking too highly of them. But I think with this schedule, that should be very doable for this Braves team. And it all starts with this upcoming 9-game stretch, the 7-game homestand, but this 9-game stretch that they have against teams with losing records. I think you have to go 7-2, at worst 6-3 in the stretch if you're the Atlanta Braves. Now, I told you I was going to take a look at the FanGraphs odds after this past weekend series against the Phillies. They now have the Phillies with a 99.9% chance to make the playoffs and a 96.2% chance to win the division. I think you can bump that up again a little bit, but they got to make sure they cover their bases. The Braves playoff odds are down to 76.3%. It was over 80% going into the weekend, and their chance to win the World Series has gone down a couple of points as well to just 5.4%. Now, we did get a little bit of update on Ozzie over the weekend. He is not as close to coming back as some people had hoped. Some people thought maybe he'd come back the first, second week of September. It does not look like he is tracking for that timeline, so it's more likely going to be the middle of September before we see Ozzie Albies, but certainly want to get him back, get that bat in the lineup. Now, we talked about this stretch of games the Braves coming up that is pivotal for them if they're going to reach the postseason. They have to take advantage of this next 9-game stretch they have. Who better to start out that stretch than Chris Sale? He'll be going up against Kyle Freeland on Tuesday night. Freeland in Colorado against the Braves lasted just 3 2/3 innings, give up 4 hits, 1 walk, 3 earned, just 1 walk or just 1 strikeout in 65 pitches. He's gone at least 5 innings in his last 3 starts, though, and he's given up 2 earned or less in his last 2. One of those coming in Yankee Stadium, one of those coming in Coors Field against the Marlins. So he's been good here lately. Watch out for that knuckle curve. His best pitch, his put-away pitch, but his sinker and slider, they both have a slugging percentage against over 600 this year. So hopefully the Braves are able to take advantage of that. For Chris Sale, got to keep going. You saw Zach Wheeler and what he did on Saturday against the Braves. It is a tight race for the NL Cy Young, and I think he is the favorite. I know he is the favorite. especially if you look at the odds on FanDuel. But he's got to keep it going because Zach Wheeler certainly is finishing very strong himself. But more importantly, have a strong start, give this Braves team a chance to win. And again, kick off this 9-game stretch that you have on a great note with Chris Sale on the mound, who's given up 2 runs or less in 14 straight starts now. If that continues, I like the Braves' chances on Tuesday to get a win and hopefully get this stretch off on the right foot. Thank you for making Locked On Braves your first listen today. Now go check out the Locked On MLB podcast where Sully's getting you ready for the postseason. Thanks for joining me here today. Got Leland that made it here at the end. Braves Thrills made it all the way to the end. Cody, Little Tony, Antonio, thank you all for joining. KGB Officer, AA, Andrew Manning, thank you all for joining me here live tonight. Hope you all had a great Labor Day. Again, this week we'll be discussing and looking at the postseason picture some more. What is the ideal wild card spot for the Braves? We'll have a mailbag episode later in the week, so make sure you're subscribed here to Locked On Braves. Also, make sure you catch the Braves and the Rockies on Tuesday night on SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search Braves. But that'll do it for this episode of a Locked On Braves. Subscribe on YouTube if you're new. Hit that thumbs up button. Leave me a comment down below, especially if you're an everydayer. Let me know that. And if you make Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day, we'd love to hear that from you as well. Subscribe to us, or follow us rather, on social media at shortstopball, at LockedOn_Braves. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast. And we will talk to you next time.